بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين. Moving on from yesterday where we discussed Taraweeh. Another thing which is very important in the month of Ramadan, especially it comes more to the fore. People become more aware of it, and some people will also engage in this action, which is the action of i'tikaf. And i'tikaf, literally, most of us know the basics of it is just for a person to stay in the masjid for a period of time. And obviously this is something which is very, very beneficial. The benefits of this, most authors, when they mention this, they say that فَوَائِدُهُ ظَاهِرٌ. The benefits obviously of staying in the masjid for a whole period of a long time is going to be very obvious. The benefits are going to be obvious. You don't need to explain so much what the benefits are. The Prophet ﷺ, however, he mentions in a hadith in Ibn Majah that a person who performs i'tikaf, then he remains free from sins. So a person, while obviously if he's in the masjid, then this will keep him away from all kind of sins. This is obviously quite obvious as well, that when a person's in the masjid, he's going to be kept away from certain types of sins. Now this is actually, the Prophet ﷺ mentions this specifically because it's a great blessing to be able to be kept away from sins for a long period of time. Is one of the main aims of our lives. So if a person's in i'tikaf, he achieves this massive aim. So the Prophet ﷺ points that out. He also says that this person, he will have the same rewards of the good deeds which other people are doing. When a person's secluded in the masjid and not allowed to leave, there's certain things he can't do. He won't be able to do ittiba of a janazah. He won't be able to visit the sick. There's certain types of sadaqah he might not do. In those times, people weren't as sustained as us. They wouldn't have long-term, food provided. They wouldn't have loads of money saved up in their bank account. So that would mean that for those 10 days, their sadaqah may go down. The money they give to other people would go down. They may not be able to help the homeless or help the poor. These are kind of things which they'd be deprived from. However, the Prophet ﷺ mentions that a person who's in i'tikaf, he will get the same reward of all these people who do these things. So if somebody was to fall ill, then other people go and visit him. The person in i'tikaf, he can't go, so he would also get the same reward. Also for the janazah, all these things which he can't do. And the Prophet ﷺ mentions another hadith that a person who does i'tikaf for 10 days in Ramadan, for the last 10 days in Ramadan, he gets the reward of 2 hajj and 2 umrah. And this is one of the main virtues which is always quoted for a person who does i'tikaf. Prophet ﷺ, in another hadith, he mentions that a person does i'tikaf just for 1 day at any time, then for this person Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will distance him from Jahannam the equivalent distance of a trench, of a very, very big trench. In another narration we find that Allah digs 3 trenches between him and Jahannam, and each trench is the distance between Mashriq wal Maghrib, between the east and the west. So this is the reward for 1 day of i'tikaf. And in one more hadith, the Prophet ﷺ mentions that all of the previous sins of a person who does i'tikaf, all of his previous sins are forgiven. Man i'takafa imanan wa ihtisaba. If he does i'tikaf with iman, with full trust in Allah, and ihtisab, meaning the hope in the reward from Allah. Ihtisab is to hope that Allah will give you a reward. So if he does if he does i'tikaf with the hope that Allah will give him a reward, then all of his previous sins will be forgiven. So these are just some of the virtues that if a person does i'tikaf, he'll get this, he'll be benefited with this. Moreover, the overall virtues are obvious that we can find. We need i'tikaf. Spending time in the masjid is something which will benefit us. Obviously, if a person was to do i'tikaf, one of the primary benefits that he gets is that he'll be able to pray all 5 salah in the masjid, and with that he'll be able to pray in the first saf, because he's going to be in the masjid the whole time. Nobody's going to beat him to the first saf. So praying in the first saf has its own reward. The Prophet ﷺ mentions that if the person who does the adhan, and the person if you knew the reward in doing the adhan, and if you knew the reward of the first saf, then you would compete very severely on this. So the Prophet ﷺ mentions the reward of the first saf is very, very high. Also, there's a separate reward for waiting for salah. A lot of us, we should have ihtisab a lot. Ihtisab means to have hope in the reward of Allah. Allah mentions that a person who comes to the masjid and nothing keeps him in the masjid except waiting for the salah, waiting for the jama'ah, then this person, he will get the reward of as if he's praying salah this whole time, even if he's just sitting there. So it's very virtuous to sit and wait for salah. A person in i'tikaf, as soon as the salah before finishes, he's waiting for the next salah. All of this reward he'll be getting, as long as this person has wudu. So this is the first thing. And a person obviously he gets to secure the best position in the masjid as well, which is directly behind the imam. We should all try and compete for this. We should never, this is one thing that we find, even in, scholars sometimes mention this in the bab of qiyam, that when should we stand out of respect for somebody else. Prophet ﷺ told the clan of Sa'ad radiallahu anh to stand for him. He said, "Qumu li sayyidikum," your leader's coming, so stand for him out of respect. This hadith comes, and also underneath this hadith people mention the importance of holding firm to your place in the saf. That if a person comes to the masjid early, he should be very strong and brave about his place in the saf. If he gets a place in the first saf, he should be very happy and proud of himself. I've got a place in the first saf. It's a great achievement. He shouldn't give it up for somebody else. And some scholars, they describe this as what we call istighna. Istighna means to think that you have enough reward, so I'm going to give my reward to somebody else. Also, when the saf is being made, we should all be very quick to try and get into the first. If there's a space there, we should see it as a great opportunity to be there. We should never, say, "Oh, you go." This is, it's just like almost, I don't need the reward. You have the reward today. We should have our desire that I want to be in the first stuff. I'm there. It should be a strong kind of a quick movement. We should feel the gaps all filling, especially the first stuff. Second stuff, the Prophet ﷺ also made a dua for the second stuff as well. So there should be a desire for the second stuff. And generally, overall, what we believe is that this space behind the imam is the best, then on his right, then left, then right, left, and he carries on going. Then the second saf, the middle is the best, then right, left, all the way to the back. So we should be moving forward as much as we can, whether it's into the fifth saf or to the sixth saf, moving forward as much as we can, as quickly as we can, to try and attain this reward. And this is something which we should have the desire for ourselves, to get this reward. So this is just generally, that was a side point. Also, when a person is in i'tikaf, he'll have no distractions. And this is the whole point of i'tikaf. I'tikaf means secluding from the rest of the world. You cut off from the rest of the world. So if a person is just in the masjid, he's not going to be worrying about whether his family is having iftar properly or sehri properly, or what they're doing at home, because he's somewhere else. He's cut off from them. They know he's fine in the masjid. If the masjid falls down or something, I'm sure they'll find out. And he knows they're fine at home, because he's left them, with provisions for that long. So this is the benefits, that a person has no distractions, and always, he's focusing on his salah. This distraction will help his concentration in salah specifically. And also, while in i'tikaf, a person has lots of time to practice nawafil. Imam Ghazali mentions that the best use of free time is to practice nawafil, so that our concentration gets better. From beginning to end, we don't lose concentration. This should be our aim. Most of us don't have this. We accept this, it's a reality, but we try and practice to get it better and better. This is something which i'tikaf helps with. So these are all joined together. Another benefit is that when a person who does i'tikaf, he becomes used to staying in the masjid. And this is something we don't always appreciate. Some people, they come last minute and they leave first minute, straight after salah. They don't have the environment of staying in the masjid. And when a person feels the peace and the blessings in the masjid, he'll find it easier to stay for longer and longer. When a person does i'tikaf, his whole life is in the masjid. He's eating, drinking, everything within the masjid. So a person finds it a lot easier to stay in the masjid. Obviously the special hadith, many hadith of people of the masjid, but specifically the famous one about the 7 people under the arsh of Allah on the day of Qiyamah. One of them is man kana qalbuhu muta'alliqan bil masajid, that his heart is mu'allaq, whenever he comes out of the masjid, he wants to come back in. That's how much love he has for the masjid. His heart is attached to the masjid. So this is one of the great rewards for being attached to the masjid. And i'tikaf gives us that love for the masjid. We get used to being in the masjid, and we'll want to be in the masjid for a longer time. Also, the rest of the benefits are very generic, and we're all aware of them. One of them is obviously, when you're in i'tikaf, one of the main things a person is going to do is recite the Quran. He's not going to, this is one of the main things he's going to do. So the connection with the Quran is established, the connection with the word of Allah is established. He begins to understand and ponder over the Quran. And most importantly, the main thing with i'tikaf, especially in Ramadan, is one of the main points of our life is achieved, which is developing a connection with Allah. That a person is free from everything else, he has no other worries, and all he's got to worry about is my connection with Allah. In these 10 days, it improves, it becomes better. This is one of the key benefits which a person has with i'tikaf. The benefits generally are very obvious. Even if I said no benefits, just do i'tikaf. Obviously you can see staying in the masjid for a long time is very good. Then moving on to the types of i'tikaf, there's i'tikaf for men and women. Generally the men do it in the masjid and the women do it in their masalla at home. So in the masjid is sometimes disputed, especially in this country. Sometimes we lease buildings and the things don't become, the houses, they don't become waqf for Allah sometimes. But generally wherever the salah is taking place and the 5 times salah is taking, there's a community around the masjid. If it's considered to be the masjid, everybody considers that, then there should be i'tikaf within that masjid. Also the i'tikaf taking place, the ruling of the sunnah, when we think of i'tikaf, generally one i'tikaf comes to mind, one of the types, which is the sunnah mu'akkada i'tikaf and the last 10 days of Ramadan. We don't think of the other ones. So based on that one, this i'tikaf is sunnatul mu'akkada, and most scholars, because in Hanafi fiqh, sunnah mu'akkada is very, very high up, it's very close to wajib, that if this is sunnatul mu'akkada alal kifaya, that if nobody does it, then the whole area becomes sinful. It's very, very important that this is carried out. The 10 days sunnah i'tikaf. Overall there's many types. One is, again, there's a wajib form, which is similar to what we done when we started fasting. There's many types of fasting. One is the wajib fast, which is a person, he does another, that I will fast for this many days, and then if he says that, he has to carry out that fast. Same with i'tikaf. If a person does another, that I will do i'tikaf on this day, or I will do i'tikaf for a certain amount of days, then when he vows that to Allah, he then has to carry out that i'tikaf. When a person is carrying out a wajib i'tikaf and he's vowed to do it for a certain amount of days, also fasting becomes wajib as well during those days. So in these, when we vow to, this can be any time of the year, a person, he does this kind of i'tikaf. Nafal i'tikaf is i'tikaf which we should always be doing. Every time we walk in the masjid, we should make intention that we are doing i'tikaf, we are staying in the masjid for the sake of Allah. Again, this is, we can do it in the same way that we do a wajib i'tikaf. Any time of the year, a person can make intention that I'm going to stay one day in the masjid, and he stays in the masjid for one day, and he makes this, and he gets the reward of that i'tikaf. And the main one is the sunnah i'tikaf, which is throughout Ramadan, but the sunnatul mu'akkada is the last 10 days of Ramadan. The Prophet ﷺ every year would stay in the masjid in the last 10 days. So one year he missed it, and the next year he done 20 days. But most scholars, they mention that throughout Ramadan, i'tikaf is sunnah, and through the last 10 days, i'tikaf is sunnatul mu'akkada, is very important. And this is because of the narrations we find the Prophet ﷺ, he would be in his tent for the whole of Ramadan, and then he'd say that first 10 days I looked for Laylatul Qadr, I didn't find it. Second 10 days I didn't find it, and then the last 10 days he looked for it even more. So the whole Ramadan he would be in i'tikaf. But for this is only one narration, but generally for the last 10 days, this is where i'tikaf is sunnatul mu'akkada. And even this is not the only time a person can do i'tikaf. I'tikaf is a generic, just like fasting, we don't only do it in Ramadan. We try and do it on Arafah, we try and do it Mondays and Thursdays, we try and do Ayyamul Bid. Some of us may try Siyam of Dawood. I'tikaf is the same. So we can try and come at different times of the year and try and just say, one day I'm going to spend in the masjid and do i'tikaf, and this is my retreat, and we become close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, Imam Bukhari in his Sahih, he mentions a hadith, not just for the last 10 days, he mentions another hadith that the reward of doing i'tikaf for the middle 10 days of Ramadan. And then he brings another bab, a whole chapter, and then he brings the chapter title and then the hadith underneath. And the other title he brings that during Shawwal, to do i'tikaf, also the rewards of doing this, because we find a hadith regarding that. So we'll find doing i'tikaf throughout the year, especially nafal i'tikaf, is rewarding, and all the benefits will still be there. If a person does it for the whole day, then the benefits of the salah and the Quran and the connection with Allah will all still be there. So it's something we can try and revive and try and do this kind of thing. There's nothing wrong with staying in the masjid, and we don't have to bring the whole house with us. We just bring a sleeping bag, and food will be, so we don't have to worry too much about our food. We bring a little bit, and we don't have to be take it so as if it's a life-changing experience to bring the whole house and we have to bring a bed and all these kind of things. It doesn't have to be such a hard thing. And even if we do it between Fajr and Maghrib, we can do this kind of i'tikaf. And i'tikaf is not something which is just restricted to the last 10 days of Ramadan. So the rules of i'tikaf are actually very simple. There's not much. Generally, when we look at the rules, we'll find lots of preferred things, lots of things to avoid. But these again are obvious. You try and engage more in ibadat, and you stay away from wasting time and playing on your phone and updating our Facebook status. But generally we try and just do the things which are good. The first rule is that it has to be a masjid. The female one, this is debated. generally, or as we know, the women do it at their home in their masalla. So a woman at home should have a place where generally they pray, and generally they do the dhikr, ibadah and the Qur'an. So they fix that place for i'tikaf. And this last 10 days of Ramadan is sunnah as well. And because of the fitan that we have, and when the Sahaba radiallahu anhu are passing away, the way they describe the difference between their time and the Prophet's time, we see that the fitna of women increased very drastically. So although some scholars still do give fatwa, we're not going to say this is the only fatwa. Some scholars say they should come to the masjid, but unfortunately in Colchester we just don't have the facilities for this much segregation for them to have their own place. So this is not the space. So that's why this is something which we don't act upon at the moment. So the men would be in the masjid and the women would stay in their houses. And the main rule of i'tikaf, which is just the one rule really, is that the person has to stay in the masjid and be in a pure state, not be in hadathul akbar. He shouldn't, have to do ghusl. So as long as he's in the masjid, this is the main rule. Now in the Hanafi madhab we have one kind of relaxed ruling and the one strict ruling. The strict rule is that you have to stay in the masjid for all your things and you can't leave at all, and if you leave even for 1 second extra, then your i'tikaf will break. This is very strict, and because most people can't really act on this because it's very hard, if somebody walks upstairs, the i'tikaf will break then the relaxed ruling is that a person has a bit of a leeway of a few minutes, that if he comes in and out and spends a few extra minutes, then it's okay, but generally he should try and spend his whole time. If we can, be very harsh on ourselves and say not at all, not even for 1 second I'm going to leave the masjid, that's fine, but the leeway is there if a person needs to leave for a few extra minutes as well. And this is generally the rule. So the main thing is that Ramadan is here now, and so it's sunnah for everyone to try, and inshallah, if we can't do the whole of the last 10 days, this is sunnatul kifaya, mu'akkada al kifaya. If a person cannot do for that whole 10 days, even if he comes for a few days, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and we'll see the benefits, we'll see the love that we get for the masjid, the love for the Qur'an, the love for salah, and this is something we all try, and not just for ourselves, but it's a good retreat. Just like when we go and we take out time throughout the year to try and get close to Allah, a great way to do it is to just spend 1 or 2 days in the masjid, and then this way we connect to Allah, we become close to Allah, and then we can come back out into the world. And this is one of the main benefits which the scholars give, but especially in the last 10 days we try and obviously make an extra effort. If we can do the whole 10 days, great, but because the environment's there in the last 10 days, this is why we see that in the last 10 days of Ramadan, everybody is kind of welcome to bring their sleeping bags and stay in the masjid. Nobody's going to stop you at all. You don't have to consult with anyone. You just come, bring your bags, stay for 1 day, stay for 2 days. As much as you can do, everybody comes and tries to do it. This is something, even if we only do 1 day or 3 days or 5 days, how many other days we can schedule our work around or schedule our life around, whatever we have to do, we come for that period of time. And because the environment's already there, food's already provided, sahri's already provided, then there's no problems there. We don't have to worry so much about in the last 10 days. So everybody's requested, especially in this year, we try and, even if it's just for 1 day, sometimes we get scared that, sleeping in the masjid and eating somebody else's food, we find it very daunting. But obviously, we're going to have to, if our work gives us training in another part of the country that you have to go to Liverpool and do training for 3-4 days, then we sleep in a random bed which we don't know whether it's even clean or not, and we eat their food which we don't know about their hygiene standards, and we do all these things because we need to get the training done to carry on our job. So in the same way, for our Islam, for our deen, and this is something we'll get used to as well, because the food here is obviously from Muslim brothers, the sleeping is in the masjid, so all of these has so many benefits, and we'll feel the effect itself. I won't have to sell it to you after that, inshallah. So I make that Allah gives me and all of us to inshallah try and do it i'tikaf for as long as we can. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah rabbil alamin.